Hi Lumineers, welcome to the Lighter Side Show. I'm your host, Jamie Butler, the Everyday Medium. Before we get into the Art of Mediation with our in-house family attorney, Miss Kelly Reese, we're going to talk first about some housekeeping notes. We have coming up for you classes. It's exactly what you were asking for. How do I connect to my intuition? How do I connect to my sensitivities? And how do I bring it into my everyday life? So it's as common as the rest of the other five senses. Sixth sense doesn't have to be left outside the box. Bring it on in. So we can do basic class in January 13th and 20th. And then we have an intermediate class, February 24th and March 3rd. And then the best is the in-person advanced mediumship class where we're going to learn how to channel that information, get closer to your guides, angels, friends, relatives, whatever you like to call your dead peeps. And that's in-house here at the Center for Love and Light, the weekend of March 24th. So sign up, guys. Come on. You've been asking for it. I need more of mediums out there in the world. Let's stand up and unite our people. You know, can't speak for United States right now. Probably I'm not going to get political. But I will talk about mediation. And so we have our guest today, Miss Kelly Reese.
Yes,
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
You are specifically an attorney for family law, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're only licensed here in the state of Georgia.
That's right.
So Lumineers, if you're getting some ideas and you live in another state, she's not your go-to girl.
Right. If somebody needs a name, I certainly can give somebody a name in different states because we have a good connection for that. But every state is law specific when it comes to family law. So
is that difficult to manage? I mean, you cross a state line, you're still in the same country, but it's a completely different system?
it is, and that's why we typically only practice in the state that we're licensed in. And what I mean by that is there's certain procedural ways that you can sort of get around that, and you can hire local counsel, and then you can also help them. But, family law is one of those things where, everybody brings their own prejudice and biases in, unfortunately. So when you go in front of a judge, it's a gray area. Nothing's black and white. So when you go in front of a particular judge, you need to know that judge's nuances and how they lean. Because I can't advise you if I don't know that judge first. So for me to go practice in another state,
oh wow, you wouldn't know the judge.
I wouldn't know the judge. So I'm not benefiting you anyway by being involved in your case. I can give you legal strategy and thought process that I would give you from my point of view, but I can't help you with those things. So you benefit more.
Which is where negotiations and mediation comes in.
Absolutely.
Because that across the board is in any state.
Absolutely. And that's part of when you're talking about going to mediation and what you should walk away with. You always look at, okay, well, what's going to happen? What are the possibilities if we take this all the way to court? Understanding sort of a cost-benefit analysis of, okay, this is what you're going to give up, and right? Well, and part of that is, listen, mediation, a good settlement in mediation, both sides are unhappy because both sides had to give something to get into a place where there's compromise. So you kind of have to prioritize what it is that's important to you and what you want out of it and what you can walk away from.
So who helps them prioritize what's important, what they want to walk away with?
Sure.
Because I think if, recently I went through a high emotional situation.
Absolutely.
And when you get into these situations, for example, for me, my head was like, oh my God, you got to grab everything. Right. It was like it went into this survival mode. Like, all of a sudden I was cave woman and I had to collect everything that I could. Right. And then my heart was like, whoa, what are you doing? It's not who we are. Right. And I was like, oh my God, am I screwing with myself? Do I now not know who I am? Right. And I had to step away. I had to practice hard to get out of my head and go, okay, I don't need to grab everything. Right. I'm okay. Right. Sit back. And I chose to actually stay still. I chose to sit down for a long period of time, which was hard because I think I've been taught in my culture, I don't know about you guys, Lumineers, that if you want to get something done, you got to get up and do it. Right. And that sitting down is considered passive or not successful. Sure. And it wasn't an option. Right. Right. Do you bring that in as an option when you're negotiating and helping that person find it out?
Absolutely. And part of this is for me, especially when there's kids involved, it makes it a lot easier for me to say to somebody, if you go through the process of going all the way through court, it gets so adversarial, you will not be able to sit in the same room with your ex-spouse. And you have to have a relationship with that person, not to mention what it does to your children through the process. So take a step back and think about that and keep your kids here, because that should be the priority when you're debating on what is and is not important. Also, you're going to meet somebody for 4 to 8 hours, maybe longer, maybe less than that. And that person who's going to meet you for 4 to 8 hours is going to decide where your kids should spend Christmas. Do you think that that person knows better than the two people that have raised the children together? Of course not.
Like, my heart is racing all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Wait, what? So in that person, you're talking about the mediator?
No, so the
What are you
judge.
the judge.
So because part of my job is
all
to
right,
give.
I've looked at your case.
Yes.
This goes here. This
Absolutely.
So in mediation,
We can be creative. Mediation gives us such a better opportunity to sit down and say, what's going to work best for you and for your children? And then I can craft a really creative agreement. I can make it work the best way for everybody involved versus walking into a courtroom and getting a standard carved in stone, here's what it is. Because judges, I mean, for what it's worth, judges are not going to, they're busy. Right? They have way too many, especially in the domestic world. They have a lot of cases in front of them. And in particular, so we have a court system here in Fulton. There are 3 judges right now, and all they do is family law, domestic cases. That's it, because there are so many. They had to carve out, and we have a family law division. And they are so busy. I mean, getting a hearing is difficult.
whoa.
Right, so because of that, they're not going to research and they're not going to say, let me try and put together what I think will encapture this person who may celebrate Jewish holidays and this person who may celebrate Christian holidays with the kids. That's something that we can do in mediation.
In your opinion, do you think mediation can kind of clear up the court schedule? Like,
Oh, a lot.
In like trying to wrap my head around it, how much is resolved in mediation versus, fighting it out in court?
95% of our cases.
You're kidding.
I'm not at all.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is good communication works?
It does. Well, and by good communication, listening to what advice is being given as well. I mean, part of what I say this to every client I have, I'm going to give you the best advice based on my knowledge as an attorney of the law and what the laws are and this judge. I'm going to give you advice. But when you are done, your case goes in a drawer and I don't take it out unless you call me down the road. You have to live it. So despite my advice, you have to make the decision if it's something you can live with. So I'm going to tell you, here are my thoughts on it, and you can tell me, I agree with you, or you can say, I disagree and I understand what you're saying, but X, Y, and Z. And as long as you're comfortable with it, I'm not going to stand in your way.
What do you think are the top reasons why people hold fast to their ideas and don't want to listen?
Anger and hurt. I mean, that's the biggest one, I think, is just anger and hurt. And they can't get past, they resonate so much on that aspect that they can't move past it to get down to what needs to happen, to get closure, to move forward, to sort of tie up that chapter. And I'll tell you, I mean, mediation, one way that it does function, and I think it's good for people, is it allows them a forum to sort of vet what's gone on. I can talk to this mediator who's going to go to both sides, who's going to hear both sides. It's not just my attorney who's my advocate, but I get to tell my story in some form or fashion. Because sometimes, I will tell you, some people need to go to court to tell their story.
They just need to be heard.
They just need to be heard. And that's okay. I mean, it's expensive, unfortunately, but there are some people that just have to have that closure and be heard before they can be done. And I've had people, and then there are certain situations where people just can't agree. For instance, relocations are really difficult, relocations of children. And I had one where she was relocating. She initially moved to New York, and my client flew up there every month, and then she told him she was moving to Seattle. Well, that's significantly different with the child.
Wow.
And so he just couldn't agree to that. He said, if the judge tells me that that's what's going to happen, then I'll accept it. But I just cannot agree for my child to move that far away. I mean, because it's going to make a substantial impact on our relationship. So we had to go to court. You don't want to know the outcome.
Oh, it's going to make me cry.
Yeah, that one almost broke me. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's hard. It's really difficult. I mean, part of my job is, and this is part of it, right? I mean, divorce or frankly, any domestic action that we do, whether it's modification of custody or whatever it may be, it's exhausting. It's emotionally, physically, and mentally draining on the person going through it. It's a difficult process. And so my job is to sort of be the rational thinker and the clarity, And so I can't get personally involved. I can't fight cases as if it's my divorce, but I'm not a robot.
No.
So, it impacts you. So that one was tough. That was a tough one.
How do you keep your distance to gain that clarity?
So I try,
Do you just swipe your hand, just shake it off like this?
if only.
Do you listen to a little Taylor Swift? Shake it off?
Yes, right? I have listen, I've got a great, my business soulmate who we work together.
I love that.
And we're each other. We actually, it's myself, her, and our paralegal, and we've been together for many, many, many years, and we just totally have each other's backs. And when we're having awful days, we can come in and vet. We sat for an hour and a half to 2 hours yesterday and just did exactly that because everybody sort of just needed that release session. And, we commiserate with one another and we celebrate with one another, and it's good. And then I also work out a lot.
So physical exertion.
Physical exertion is very
good.
good.
Of your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Did you sit down in your office and create that space where you can go and vet and just say, hey, no matter what I'm saying right now, it doesn't belong to you? And it's really not coming from a place of me, but
Sure.
it's coming of a place of release.
Yeah, we just opened a satellite office. And so the three of us are actually in the satellite office, and we had the capability and the ability to make it what we wanted it to be.
Yes.
And so it's not your sort of, and this is not an attack on the other office, because the other office is beautiful and all those things, but it's more casual. My husband calls it, he said, this is not your office, this is your apartment. This is where you guys come hang out.
The lawyer's living room.
That's right, exactly. It is. Well, and it's designed because, again, this is such a different field that we work in. You want to establish a trusting relationship with somebody. Like I said, we spend a lot of time talking to each other. We will have many interactions. I still see many of my clients after cases are over just to grab a drink and catch up. Because you form a relationship with them. So we wanted to make a space where people could come and sort of relax a little bit. This isn't, I don't need to sit across from you at a desk in a chair, so we have a very nice casual space in the front with a couch and some big chairs and,
All right, so this gets me thinking, a lot of us, when we think about attorneys or even think about hiring a lawyer, it's like,
right.
They're going to be a little more driven than I want them to be.
Sure.
A lot of them are kind of labeled
absolutely
assholes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aggression.
I dislike most attorneys, so I get it, right? I have to work against them. No, I'm just kidding.
And it's not really a therapeutic place to be.
Sure.
But a lot of what you're talking about is by definition therapeutic. You're listening.
It is.
You're providing good communication. I know you use the word advice, but in the ways that you're describing it, it sounds like counsel.
It is.
So are there do you get to go through counseling school when you're a lawyer? I know you have to learn all the law, how to advocate for it, how to defend it and all this, but my God, do they...
Well,
I don't even know you know what I'm saying.
Sure, how do we get... So it's an interesting question because, frankly, most people don't choose family law.
They
fall into it or they run away from it. And I will say that we are a little bit different in the sense that, so my partner, we chose family law. That's the only thing I've ever done. It was the only thing I connected with. I love people and I love being with people and having that interaction. I could never imagine just sitting behind a desk, paper pushing. I just would do it.
Yeah, but you're only engaging with people in their high
the worst
emotion.
That's right, the worst of the worst. Right, absolutely. And so when I was at Florida, when I was at the University of Florida.
Oh, let's pause. Go Gators.
Go Gators, that's right. You see the swing. So when I was at University of Florida, when I was at law school there, they actually gave you the opportunity to take a couple of graduate courses. And they counted towards my law school education. And you just had to take certain levels of graduate courses. And so I took 2 graduate courses. And one of them was, I started in domestic violence clinics. So that's my background. So one of the classes that I took was basically, it was high-end graduate level social work. So just identifying certain burns and things like that and how you sort of go through those issues with people. And then I took marriage counseling, which was the most uncomfortable class I've ever taken because well, and I'll tell you why, because we have such different, so I don't ask why, I just want to know certain facts, right? I mean, that's the way that I'm designed to think when I'm looking at your case. A therapist looks at it in such a different way than I do. So it helped in a lot of ways to understand that process, but you're right. Part of this job is you have to be a really good listener, and you have to be incredibly responsive because people's anxieties are at an all-time high, and the longer the lapse time is, the higher that goes. So I try to be really responsive. And for what it's worth, we have many people that come in that need some additional help because by no means am I a licensed therapist, and I do send them to somebody to talk to.
You have referral
absolutely,
systems?
absolutely. Because
Fabulous.
listen, I had a case that went. I had a divorce that went 4.5 years. It was awful. It was awful, and a lot of that was because of the judge, and a lot of that was because the husband was so angry with the way it ended, and he knew the only thing she wanted was a divorce, so he did everything he could to delay it. And he was very successful at it because of the particular judge who's no longer on the bench. And those two, they can't be in a room together. I mean, they can't sit at a game together. It's awful. And they have 3 children together. So that was 4.5 years of her life just being constantly in court, constantly being served with other discovery, constantly, I try and tell people as much as I can, I make that metaphorical box. So here's your box, here's all your divorce stuff. You need to put it in the box, and you need to put it on a shelf, and you need to go back to doing your life. You need to go to work, and you need to be a great parent, and you need to do all the things that you need to do. And you only pull that box down when I call you and say, I need you to take some stuff out of the box and send it my way. But that's easier said than done. I mean, to compartmentalize that, because it's exhausting. It's just an exhausting process.
But it's so nice to hear from your end that you understand that is what your client is going through,
Right.
and that you were providing emotional help, as well as guidance, advice, and counseling.
Sure.
Because a lot of us, when we think about it, we don't see that connected right now.
Right.
That's just, you're getting it, and you've got to survive on your own somewhere else.
Right. And I mean, and that's why mediation, I think, is so successful in family law in particular, because there is a value associated with ending it, with being done with it, with not continuing the process of going on for another year or 2 years and waiting to get into court. There is a value with that.
So in mediation, have you learned, or can you share with us some top listening skills?
Sure. So I think part of, one of the things that I will say is that I am first to, it's a ping pong, right? I mean, it's sort of you go by your hip because you don't know what they're going to come back with.
I love this slang stuff, ping pong.
Yeah, well,
you stay in the moment.
Well, and I tell people, right? Like you're
else.
sort of shooting from the hip because you don't know what's coming back. I mean, and that's part of this process is it's just going back and forth, and the mediator is the one who goes back and forth between the room to facilitate that negotiation. And so let's say that we make the first offer. Obviously, I've had conversations with my client, and we know what we're walking into, and we know what we're going to propose as a first offer. But when that counter offer comes back, because I've never been involved in a mediation where the first offer was accepted. Usually everybody always says it's like 4:30, that's when everything happens, right? Because everybody's like, it's almost 5, I gotta get out of here, and that's when the work really happens.
No way.
Yeah. And I've had some finish earlier, but it takes a long time. I mean, it just does. Part of this, again, is vetting, telling your story. So that first go around with the mediator usually takes anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, depending on all the issues that are involved in your case. So when a counter comes back and the mediator is reading it off, I think that the person's first instinct is to jump at each thing said, because they're so angry with how they responded.
Oh, kind of like being triggered to
Correct.
what the other person or defending.
That's right. Like, I can't believe that he or she would say that, right? Or I can't believe they're offering that, and I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing that. So what I always tell people is, okay, we're going to be quiet first and let them go through the entire counteroffer so that we can go and address each issue one at a time.
So it's listening to the whole.
Listening to the whole first, and then we go over. That's right. Be quiet.
Close it.
Be quiet. Because the mind is just constantly running, right? Especially when you're hearing these things, and especially when it's an unreasonable offer.
Yes. That's a good point. Like, okay, what if I'm good at keeping my mouth closed, which is talented, by the way, because I talk all the time. But my head. my
Sure.
head's not doing the same thing.
So
like
that-
you just said,
right.
it's looking at every word, ha, ha, ha,
Right.
It's not
So that's what I'm
listening.
there for, right? So I'm writing down every single counter offer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over each one. And then when we finish going over it, we're going to talk about, again, what we're sending over before it goes over.
Okay, so if I don't have a Kelly Reese in my pocket.
Right.
And I'm all by myself, I can get a piece of paper and a pen.
Absolutely.
Zip
write
it.
down each.
And
That's
write
right.
down.
Write down your list, and then you go back and address each item. And then you can jot down sort of what your thoughts and ideas are on each issue, right? So creatively, that's the whole purpose. So let's say, for instance, we get a child support. And in Georgia, it's a guideline, which means you put numbers in, it spits numbers out, but that's always negotiable. So part of the numbers that go into child support are childcare expenses and health insurance premiums. So what I typically do is say, well, there's goods and bads to everything, but you could take the childcare out of a worksheet and you can do percentages of that instead of sticking it all in. So that's like a creative solution to it, right? There's alternatives. So what I would suggest is for each issue and counterproposal, then talk about what the alternatives are to propose back. And it just goes back and forth until you get to one where the two of you can actually accept the terms. But that's what I would say is for each one, you want to identify each and every issue individually and spend time with each one, because once you make that offer and it goes out into the other room, if they accept it, that's it.
So you prioritize what your needs are, start at the top.
Right, start at the top.
Until you're going down your list until the both of you can agree.
Right.
That is ping pong.
It is, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, and that's, and then I also, oftentimes people they go down that rabbit hole of, well, what's he going to do if I do this? And what are they going to say if we do this? And what's their angle going to be if we do
Right,
this?
so is that like living in risk management and not staying in the moment? Like you're preparing
Correct.
for things that aren't even happening
Correct.
yet. Is that a waste of time?
Absolutely. So, and it's so much effort, right? And so
Yes.
exhausting. So focus here. We're not going to go there. And that's part of all of this process, right? Is look, one step at a time. We just filed the case. He has 30 days or she has 30 days to answer, one step at a time. Then we'll talk what's next.
But who picks the steps?
Who picks this?
Yeah,
Well,
how do we know what step is happening? Is because there's a process in place
Sure.
that you follow?
There
or
is. Yeah.
if, you're not going to court
Right.
and you have a mediator,
Right.
is there steps there as well?
yeah,
Or-
there are. So let's say you're not going to court, you're getting ready for mediation. So there's going to be certain information that we both need from each other, right? So financial information, specifically in divorce cases, assets, liabilities, incomes. So I need to know that information. So we'll exchange some documents. I'll give you my 401k current statement and my bank statements. And, here's my most recent income. And here's my tax returns from last year. So now we've exchanged it. So now we know in the big picture what we're talking about. So here are the things that we need to divide and work through. The more issues, obviously, the longer the mediation. And typically more difficult.
No, that's very true. The more issues, the more steps.
That's right. Also true.
So-
But this is, that's the thing. I mean, this is a difficult process to navigate by yourself. I will say that. I mean, if you get a really good mediator, they can't give you legal advice, but they can try to keep that negotiation going. But it is a difficult process.
So even though you are an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
you sometimes will mediate between two parties?
Well, I'm not a licensed mediator, so I cannot step in and mediate. So the one thing that I can do and have done is if two parties are done, they've reached an agreement, sometimes they'll come in together and say, here's what we're doing. Now you have to have them sign off on a conflict letter. So
Okay.
there's some steps to take, but typically the cleaner way is just tell me what the terms are, and then I can put it all together. Because if you come in together like that and something goes wrong, I have to get out because there's a conflict.
Yes.
So now you
understood.
gotta, right? So, that's the only way that I can really. Now, I have worked many cases where the parties themselves have worked things out and said, here's the agreement that we have,
This is what we want.
and then I just put pen to paper and I draft everything. And I file everything, and I make sure everything goes smoothly through the system, and so that you get your divorce in the time frame that you want it,
So getting back to listening,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about listening to the whole,
right?
and taking notes so that not only can you have your mouth closed, but you
Right.
can have your head kind of focused on something
Right.
and listening to the moment, the now,
Yep.
going off the hip.
That's right.
After we've done that, are there any other things that you coach or tell your client to listen to or pay attention to? Are there any other skills that you use or that you suggest other people use?
Well, breaks. So if you need a break from the room,
Oh, I was like, break, like.
so like a headspace, no.
Like,
So like if you need a break to get some headspace, take it. There's no rush. If there's at any point in time, if I see anybody being there's some discomfort on their part or they're really hesitant, I always say, just because we may not settle today as we're sitting here does not mean settlement discussions end. If you're not comfortable with it, don't take it.
oh my God.
Sleep
Say
on
it
it.
again, say it again.
If you're not comfortable with it, do not accept it. Sleep on it. When you get up in the morning, call me and let me know how you feel. And then we'll go from there.
I have a big thing about identifying when you're uncomfortable, because intuitively,
Right.
when you're sensitive to energies or empathic, when you're uncomfortable, just that small little bit, something big is happening.
Right.
And it needs to be paid attention to.
Absolutely.
But I don't think that language is often used. And to hear you use
Yeah.
it in this kind of mediation
Sure.
law
Right.
environment,
Right.
like, if you're not comfortable, I mean, yes.
Yeah,
We need to have that written down anywhere.
right, yeah. And I'm sure you pick up on it so much more than I do, right? I mean, I can see usually there's a little bit of hesitation to go back over with. And, like I said, that's why I always go through it again before it goes back over. Okay, let's be clear. Here's what you're proposing.
Love the clarity.
Go through it again, just so we all know, and not just for you, but also for the mediator, to make sure they wrote it down correctly and what they're presenting is the right thing too, because they're human as well. And a lot of numbers are being thrown back and forth. So, and then if you have any hesitation, I have no problem with us stopping mediation now. And that's also part of, if I see somebody just emotionally upset and just
Yeah.
can't handle it, then we'll just shut it down.
That's beautiful. You're
Yeah.
taking care of the person's emotional state.
Right. Absolutely. Well, in this field, and I think that's a lot of the reason why people either run from family law, right?
yes.
Or sort of go into it, because it's so that is part of what we do. So, and that's why I think it is a little bit more of a stressful.
Yes, I would sign up for that as well.
Yes.
So we have listening to the whole. We have put on the brakes, which I like to call pause creates momentum.
Okay. I like
And
that.
then we have understanding if you're uncomfortable.
Right.
Being able to identify that.
That's right.
And addressing that.
That's right.
So that creates the good listening environment, the processing environment.
Right.
Then you go from there as to communication. And one of the things I heard you use is that when you're taking the notes, you prioritize what your needs are.
You do.
So in communication, do you address that as well? Like, let's hit the top one, or?
So I wouldn't necessarily say I'd tell the other side, right? But I would probably tell the mediator. If there's an issue for somebody I'm working with that I know that they're just not going to go past. For instance, I've had many clients that will say to me, I will accept no less than a joint physical custody schedule with my children. I'd be an active parent, and that, and I had a recent father. And so that was exactly what he said. And he said, we don't even need to touch the financial piece until we get that one. So when the mediator first met with us, I made it very clear to him that is his main priority. It's important to him, and he's not going to even get to B, C, and D if we can't get it there. And so he said, all right, let me take it in there. And so with him knowing that, then he went in and worked really, really, really hard to get that. And he did. And then we went from there.
Oh, good. It was a happy story.
It was a great story. Yeah,
Oh,
they
I like
finished.
this.
They, like I said, 95%. I mean, most of these cases are going to settle at mediation. It's incredibly expensive to go to trial. And you're not talking about AT&T as my client. I mean, these are people, right?
Yeah.
This is this would be me writing a check out of my savings account. I mean, it's a very expensive process, unfortunately. So
Okay, now I'm extremely curious. Can I ask what is the average cost of divorce in 2016?
Sure. So it's and I'll tell you. So family law, we can't do contingency fees. It's not, by law, we're not allowed to do that. So I can't say I'll take a percentage of what you get in the divorce, right? So we can only do flat rates or hourly. And we don't do flat because, frankly, it would just go, it would be bad. So we do hourly. So we are an hourly rate, and that person's hourly rate depends on a lot of things. The first of which is how long they've been practicing family law. The second is basically, are they somebody who has high credentials in the family law field, or is this somebody who maybe practices all different other types of law and family law sort of slides in there? And then you also have, sole practitioners are probably going to be a little bit less expensive on an hourly than you would at a firm.
I so just like to imagine that it was sole, like SOU practitioner, but yeah, let's just work.
I like that actually.
Sole.
Because, I like that. So it depends on that. So, listen, I've done cases where everything from start to finish has been $2,500, including filing fee, doing all the paperwork, et cetera. And then I've had them go to hundreds of thousands of dollars, when you litigate everything. So
Wow.
it can span the vast majority.
There's
really no, there's
then.
no average. Well, and every
wow.
case is different. Like I said, the more issues, the more expensive. So if it's a case that has issues of custody and alimony, those are the two most expensive. Custody and alimony, expensive cases. So if the more issues that are in there, typically the more expensive it's going to be. Less issues, not as long to get it done, and less expensive, usually.
Well, getting back to communication. Making sure like mediation is so much cheaper, guys.
So much cheaper.
Let's stick to the good communication. So we've prioritized kind of what we want to convey.
Right.
And then what goes from there?
So I think that that's important to prioritize with the mediator, what you want and what your expectations are and what you want out of it. Knowing, of course, and I think when you walk in, you have to have a little bit of an open mind. And what I mean by that is positions that you may have taken 2 months prior may not be the same positions that you take in mediation.
Oh my God, how do you remind people who are under emotional duress that that is an opportunity instead of I'm losing or I'm surrendering or I'm being taken from and I'm a victim?
Sure. And in my specific field, it's, again, you go back to, okay, if you're arguing over $10,000, it's going to cost you 3-4 times that for us to go argue this in court. And you could ultimately still lose that case. So there's that. That does help me a little bit in my case. And then, the other is just, again, how much longer do you want this to go on for? And what I tell people is that, look, things are the way they are now. There's already tension, but once you go to court, it's every bad thing I can say about you is what happens on both sides. And so it's really difficult to ever look at that person again or have a relationship with that person. There's no going back after that.
Would you think mediation, and not to put words in your mouth, but would you think mediation is more healing than the court system?
I think it's more healing in the sense that it gives people an opportunity to have that life with one another afterwards, and that they can say, okay, it didn't work out for us. We got divorced for obvious reasons, right? I mean, it just didn't work, but at least we were able to come together and figure out a solution that worked best for our family. And so I think that they have more trust in each other. I think people are more apt to actually stick to what they agreed to do versus being ordered to do it.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, and this does happen, is that, specifically when it comes to parenting time schedules, I try and draft things so that you don't have to revisit it. I mean, that's my job, right? I don't want you to ever have to come back and go to court again. But I can't always draft for everything that may happen with kids because kids are just unpredictable. Some kids end up going to boarding school. Some kids have special needs that come up later in life. So we can't always address everything. But when you have people that settle it by mediation, those two are more likely to be able to work it out, all those future issues, than they are to come back to me and say, I need to file another case.
Do you ever, after the divorce, talk to the two parties and say, this is how you can communicate? Or do you ever? Well,
I can't talk to both. I mean, I will tell you this, we use a lot of now is co-parenting therapists who are fantastic. So you take situations with people that are not married anymore, that are trying to co-parent, and this is really helpful, I will tell you, when second families are starting to be introduced. So blended families, very difficult situations. So co-parenting is really helpful. And people will go in with a co-parenting therapist and sort of work through parenting issues together with that person's help. So I will send people to co-parenting therapists a lot.
I've got an idea in my head that, a lot of us think about therapy and only needing therapy when things go wrong.
Right.
Imagine how incredible it would be if they were going okay or even good, and you had the co-parenting therapist to
Right.
really just kind of give you that
Yeah,
strength and the
absolutely.
wholeness to it. That would be incredible.
Yeah. And I will tell you, there are some situations where people will write it in that they'll go once a month for a period of time to see a co-parenting therapist.
You can put that into
Oh,
your...
absolutely. See, and that's the benefit of mediation. Judges don't think that way. They're busy, they take forms, and that was the problem. The initial parenting plan was just a form. It takes a lot of time to draft a graduated parenting schedule that's appropriate for, let's just say, for kids at times of divorce when kids are from 0 to 6 months old. You have to draft a very graduated plan, and it starts out with frequent continuing contacts for 2-3 hours, 3 days a week, and then it ramps up, but it has to be an appropriate time frame for that. And judges just aren't going to take the time to do it because you have to break in holiday schedules, and they would be different for each time. Right, so it's an effort. It's a lot of effort. So judges just don't have the time to do that. So, you're not going to get that if you go to court. You can get that if you go to mediation.
Hey, can we get mediation for things like my children aren't cleaning up their room when I ask them to? And can we
Good
get
luck.
some mediation like when I'm at the ice cream shop and I want 6 flavors on one cone and they tell me that's not possible?
Perfect. Why not? I think that should be a rule in all ice cream shops when you walk in, just above the sign.
Mediation for
available.
hire.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
An extra X amount per hour.
that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. If only. If only. But it is it's just a great way to resolve things. And especially in this world, right? In family law, because it's personal things.
So would you agree that mediation is a better opportunity than pushing for court or the fight, really?
Absolutely. And when I sit down with people, when I first meet with them, that's the discussion is, so where do we go from here? How does the procedure? And I always talk about, we try and settle it first. I always try and settle a case first. Now, that being said, there are some cases where people just take really unreasonable positions and you're forced to go to court. And that happens. But making the attempt to at least try and get into mediation is a good thing. And I'll tell you, most courts now require it.
Really?
Most family courts are requiring it.
Thank you, Family Court.
Yeah.
Thank you for supporting good communication.
Right. And I actually, when I was going to school in Florida, they are part of a court system that also does
Go
it.
Gators.
Right? So we have in Georgia, they're going to send you to mediation the majority of the time. They don't want, and that's also because the judges, they don't really want to hear it. They would rather you go settle it. That's the reality of it.
You go
That's
do
the reality
the
of
work.
it.
I have this dream, Kelly, that starting in elementary school, that we put in nonviolent communication or some kind of communication skills where people can talk about how they feel and what they need and how are those needs going to get met. Not where it's out of aggression and I'm only taking care of myself,
Sure.
but in a sense that it creates a smooth community.
Right.
And can you imagine the ways that these children would fall in love, the way that they build business relationships,
Right.
the way that they would consciously end romantic relationships, how different it would be if we had those skills set in place.
No, absolutely. Although I may not have a job anymore.
Whoops, there's the downfall in it. There's the downfall in it.
I'm just kidding.
But maybe we can
No,
get
that'd
you
be
the job
great.
of putting it in
That's
the
right.
schools.
Yeah, no, that would be. That's part of it, right? Is that these people that walk in through our doors are typically there because they had a breakdown in communication, and then it became larger and larger and larger from there. So that's sort of why I think you do have attorneys as kind of like a voice of reason of no, okay, listen to what's being said first, and then let's talk about it. So it's sort of breaking down each element so that you're not thinking too much, right? You're overwhelmed if you think too much. It's
Yes.
one thing at a time.
Listen and communicate.
That's right. Listen and say that. Keep repeating that over
Listen
and over again.
Communicate. I
Right.
kind of liked your phrase of where you said, "Where do we go from here?" Like I can see myself getting out of bed and standing up and
Yeah.
going, "So, where do I go from here?"
Right.
Like it's something new in every moment. It's
Right.
great.
Right.
So our time is ending with our Lumineers here. Is there anything, Kelly, that you would like to leave or a bit of advice, favorite quote? I know I just put
You
you
put
on
me
the
totally
spot.
on the spot.
Yes, I didn't even tell her I was going to pull this
You
one.
didn't. You didn't. No, I mean, mediation is a great tool, I think, especially in family law cases. And, I always tell people that when I work off of a parenting plan, I give you an agreement. If we settle it and you walk out, that's something that you can stick in a drawer and you pull it out if you need it, right? You can always do more, you just can't do less. So if you walk away with some sort of established relationship, some way to be able to communicate with that person, then you're going to ultimately have a much better separation process and a much better relationship with children if they're involved. So
I love that. You can always do more. You can't do less.
that's right. That's right. You can always do more. You can't do less.
Okay, here's a little personal thing. So you did go to University of Florida.
I did.
Yes, I did as well.
Double.
Oh, you did your
I did double. Yeah.
Nice. I did not. I only got my BA. And I was in the performing arts department.
Right.
And we would go over to the law department. And once a year, you would host these faux trials.
Yes.
And we would get the scripts. We would pick our characters, remember the entire case, and play that character in the faux court that you guys had on stage.
Yes.
And it was the most fun acting I've ever done.
The mock trial.
It was the mock trial because we could go off the wall or we could refuse to give information.
Right.
To taunt the lawyers.
Yep. Fun,
The
right?
law students. Oh, it was
fun.
Crazy fun.
Yeah.
Every year we were like scampering to put our name on the list. Put
me in.
Put me in, because they would only take so many.
Right. Well, because and they still do that.
Yes,
because they have like their little courtroom there.
It
Absolutely.
It looks absolutely real. There's a
It
judge
does.
and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They do
good
that around
times.
here too. If you ever.
Oh, they do. I don't think I can fall back into it.
Yeah, just
Was
you know what they're
there?
doing it with is high school students and stuff. They're having them go through full on mock trials.
Really?
Yeah, and some of the college students too. And then they'll bring in attorneys from just the area, volunteer to come in and sort of judge it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is excellent.
It's cool. I mean, it's great.
You
And some
learn
people
a
really
lot.
love it. Yeah, absolutely. And I had one. This is a good. So these kids, mom and dad just weren't doing their jobs, and unfortunately drugs and things like that were involved. And so aunt and uncle, who didn't have any kids of their own, took both kids in, put additions on the house, have raised these kids. Amazing people, just amazing people. And the daughter, their niece, she did a mock trial, and she had such a great time, and now she sort of like heads it at her school, and she's getting ready to start college next year. So
Is she going to go for law?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure.
Fingers
Yeah, you
crossed.
kind of go through and see what you want to do. Well, college is fun. You got to explore a little bit.
Yeah, and definitely do some mock trials.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
For being
Thanks for
here
having
and
me. I appreciate
just
it.
kind of laying the whole process out. And
Yeah, and hopefully now I've dispelled what a typical attorney is.
I think you have, yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify myself as a typical.
Please
attorney.
don't say that.
I'm in
Take that one
jeans and all
back.
that
I'd
good
like to-
stuff. I know. It's
We'd
unfortunate.
like to think that you are typical, so that we feel cared for and provided
I understand
for.
that. Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's part of the vetting system, right? You get the opportunity to go meet with as many people as you want to figure out who's going to be best for you. And that's part of listening and communicating.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And you don't mind all the emails of us going, Kelly, who do I need to talk to?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
Ooh, well, to know more about Kelly Reese, look below. We will have all the information there that you need.
Thank you.
But Lumineers, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for showing up. And remember, it's not woo-woo, it's true. Bye.
True.
It's true.